Hello everybody, my name is Robert Feldman. I'm the CEO and co-founder of WOWS Insurance. What we are is a wholesaler, so we're a little unique in the fact that we bring insurance companies and carriers into California. We actually have our own programs. Really what I'm here today to talk about is, besides the fact that we have over 3,000 brokers across California and really 8 to 9 states that's writing policies in fire zones through us currently, really kind of give you guys a direction to kind of follow up with what you just heard from the fire departments. Insurance is changing. Obviously right now, it doesn't take anybody that's really watching the news or anything right now sees the full retreat from the insurance companies as an industry. What's happening is, and where the change is coming is right now, is really based on what you've been hearing a lot of today. It's about fire hardening. Fire hardening is the really next direction of insurance. We have our own insurance program right now that is writing throughout 8 Western states. These are high value, and we have different carriers that we write through below this. So a lot of you right now are being put on the California Fair Plan when there's no need to. The reason why you're being put on the Cal Fair Plan is a lot of it has to do with fire hardening, and that's really the difference. So as you heard today, the 0 to 5 feet, these are things that everyone needs to realize is the directional change of insurance. Even Cal Fair Plan, I'm on committee for a lot of different things, including some of the subcommittees for Cal Fair Plan. They are looking at this now as a change. Cal Fair Plan is no longer going to allow just basically everyone to be on it without any kind of mitigation. You're going to see reflections in rates. You're going to see things that are going up for those that are not doing fire hardening. The state of California is also, as you heard just prior to me, talking about doing mandated requirements for 0 to 5 feet. But there's a whole host of things that really insurance companies are now going to be looking forward consumers to do. The fire hardening or having a full fire hardening report is going to be crucial for every one of you out there, whether you're on the Fair Plan or other insurance companies. It's really important to have that done. What that does is basically show you, what are your strengths and weaknesses based on a fire? Do you have the 0 to 5 feet? Do you have the low mitigation to 30? Do you have a cypress tree that's 8 feet from your house? I deal with this all the time. I have insurance brokers that call me throughout California and the Western United States. They're asking to bring consumers into our programs. The very first thing we do when we look at it is we're looking at, one of the great things about Google now, I hate to say it, as terrible as it sounds, you can zero in almost as above and zero into a house. I mean, there are areas of the Western United States, guys, I'll be honest with you, I didn't even know existed. And we're looking at houses for these places, for these brokers, and we work with and deal with directly. Well, when I look at a property and if I see cypress, eucalyptus, or palm trees, you're probably not going to make it. If I see vegetation within 5 feet, you're not going to get into one of our programs. It's the ones that are going to be successful going forward is really going to be fire hardened houses to make sure those eaves. The fire department got up here and talked about 1/8 inch mesh. We have carriers now that on part of our program require 16th inch mesh, even tighter. We are requiring a lot of things. But again, though, it's exponentially different when it comes to rates. We're seeing rate fluctuations right now in the industry over 400% rate variances. Think about that for a second. That's somebody with a $10,000 policy that can be a $40,000 policy just based on fire hardening. Why everybody out here needs to realize what is changing is that the California Fair Plan, as I mentioned earlier, not really having a lot of requirements, have already made their first steps. For example, they're requiring roofs less than 25 years of age, or they'll do what's called depreciation. It's called actual cash value. They're going to be including inspections. The Fair Plan never inspected anything. Now they're doing inspections, just like other insurance companies. They're going to want to verify, do you have this 0 to 5 feet? California law is going to be pushing this through, as you mentioned, in the next 3 years. Don't wait for that. I'm going to warn you now, because you're going to be sitting there holding the bag. As bad as the industry has gotten right now with carriers, there is no part of California that does not have an insurance company or an insurance product that's writing besides Cal Fair Plan. So one of the things I always ask, just by the crowd right now, by show of hands, how many of you are currently on the Cal Fair Plan? Yep. Well, I have an example. I have a meeting with one of the insurance brokers down in Temecula. I'll be down there on Tuesday. This insurance broker didn't have access to any insurance markets. That's what we are. We bring access to markets. And basically, this gentleman in his office has 5 or 6 good full-time reps. They had a book of business of 1,186 Cal Fair Plan policies. They took it over to us. We were able to take 43% of them off Fair Plan. And there's another 20 or 30% if they had proper mitigation, we could. This is the change. So being told there are no options is not a correct answer. Okay? The industry is taking its beatings, obviously, right now because of the fires. Well, I'll tell you something scary. Our WOWS program, it was projected through the fires. We actually had a 4% loss ratio. We had the homes that were standing. Reason for it, again, is fire hardening. So there's a lot of things that are coming forward and changing. Now, I always like to make sure I'm careful with this because this can go in a lot of different directions, guys. So I make sure if you want to ask questions, ask me. I really want to make sure I can answer it. By the show of hands, we can make this a California Fair Plan conversation if you'd like, or we can talk about the industry even further going forward. Do you have any questions to start with? Or because I'll keep going if you guys don't watch me. You guys are supposed to laugh when I say that. Yes, sir. A fire hardening report is generally, it depends on which one you're looking for. A fire hardening report can be done through CAL FIRE. That's not going to help you with the insurance community. We have very specific products or programs that we work with. Usually most fire hardening companies, or several that are here, will have their reports that you can do them. We just have very specific because I'm able to continue to bring insurance companies. I work with London syndicates. This next week I'll be down in San Diego. In 2 weeks I'll be in London pulling in additional carriers. Okay. I will tell you, as terrible as the news has said and the direction it is, we actually have this. We have it. We've turned the tides. I can't say it's not going to get worse, but we are turning the tides to make it better throughout California and really 8 to 9 states. Okay, a lot of it has to be in the buy-in, and it's just really education. You know, sir, you had a great question there. How do I get a fire hardening report? That's the number one thing everybody here should be talking about and thinking about. Because I've survived. I was 25-year insurance broker prior to becoming a wholesaler, bringing insurance carriers in. As I mentioned, I have 3,000 insurance brokers across California and growing. You know, I built a program actually for an insurance company to change how insurance works. One of the major examples of our program, for our WOWS program for high value ones, and there's companies that are now copying us, it's the first policy in the history of California fully transferable from sellers to buyers. It means it becomes an asset of the house. These are things that are just, I hate to sound terrible, guys. I've been a street broker for a long time. They finally gave the street broker, the guy who sees every fire and sees what wins in a fire and what loses in a fire, they finally gave me the keys to the car. So I'm making changes. We've got this fight won. It's just a lot of it's going to be education and really getting communities, events like this where you guys all got to kind of get on board. You know, I kind of laugh. I'm looking right behind us and seeing vegetation. You see how it's sparsely removed. There's going to be a lot of requirements to get people in to change the direction. By a show of hands, how many of you believe that insurance costs are going down anytime soon? Okay, well, believe it or not, in our WOWS program for high value, which we have others that are mimicking, it actually does. And we're directly changing it. Yes, sir. So the question really is, with homeowners associations, the investments in changing things to bring to compliance, really what is it going to do for savings? Really right now, you got to realize something. It's actually going the other way. There's an HOA that I dealt with in Westlake Village. It's 101 units, a condo association, different than homes, okay? But same kind of concept. Same kind of concept. Their farmers policy was non-renewed. They had a $55 million HOA insurance policy, okay? It was $85,000 a year. Okay, for 101 units, pretty reasonable. The best they could actually get through the different syndicates was $640,000 a year. They had to loss assess everybody. So why they brought me in to talk about it was is that I was able to actually start to reverse the trend because we're using fire hardening techniques and things to make companies feel a lot more comfortable to bring it in. Now, realistically, I think that's going to probably be a $200,000 or $300,000 policy when we come up as we continue to fix it, and then we'll reverse the cost over time. Okay? But really, what you have to think about, the things that you're doing right now as an HOA, if you don't do these changes, think of it as about more of a having availability of insurance, having the ability to, or not have an explosion in rate. When I work with London syndicates, and I do a ton, for those that don't know, most insurance companies have what's called reinsurance. These are London syndicates, different places all over the world. I work with one of the largest ones, which is Munich Re. Munich Re, I have a product called American Western that we wholesale through. Spectacular company, but it's really about fire hardening with them. If the house doesn't have the fire hardening, they're not going to touch it. We had one in Calabasas we just finished. It was a client that had $2.4 million of coverage with State Farm being canceled at $19,000. They got their fire hardening, they got everything cleaned up, got everything put together, they put their vents on, did everything. We were able to take it down to $6,800 a year. Okay, that's a major change. Now, it doesn't mean everybody here is going to be in that major change at this moment, but we continue to bring in. I'll be in London, and I think it's the next 2 or 3 weeks. I'm asking for an additional, it's kind of, by the way, just side note, it's really crazy for me personally when I go over to London for these reinsurance companies, because, you know, you're asking for billions of dollars of capacity. And on my last trip, I actually picked up about 30 billion in capacity for California. I keep continuing to bring additional capacity to California. I'll bring in different, what's called line slips and different opportunities to continue to spread risk. Yes, sir. Which Richard's question was, how am I able to do in different insurance programs or continue to bring them in to California when others are leaving? It's really straightforward and simple. 2 things. One, I talked about the fire hardening aspect. 16th inch mesh, no open exposed eaves, 0 to 5 clearance. You know, really, the second part is the most important part. Believe it or not, what's really destroying the industry right now for insurance is oversaturation. Oversaturation in markets. So what happens is with carriers, State Farm was the one that really got caught in this, okay? They ended up in a situation where they had too much of a share of a given area. So actuarially being sound, you can't, so if I have a street and there's 10 homes on the street, in theory, they should be 10 different insurance carriers. And if you do that correctly, that's what we continue to do. You're spreading risk. So how do I get away with this is that I keep bringing additional programs and additional reinsurance programs in from different places and spreading risks across California and 8 states. And as I do that, that diversifies the risk. It's kind of scary when you think about it. The definition of insurance is diversification of risk. And the industry has gotten completely away from that. So to answer your question, Richard, how we're able to do this is we bring things in for those that fix their houses and fire harden. We're able to generally bring carriers in that are diversifying risk. So the question was, how would I spread risk in this area? What you have to do is you actually need multiple carriers. And actually what's kind of unique about how we built this a little bit, again, is the fact that we were able to build it almost as portfolios, so that different insurance companies can participate in the different portfolios and just still maximize the spread of risk. Really with reinsurance companies, what reinsurance companies are investment pools. Everyone's heard of Lloyd's of London, where Lloyd's of London has the baseball pitcher's arm insured. Really what that is, a pooling of money to insure the baseball pitcher's arms. These are insurance companies throughout the world. I go to Germany, go to different places. In Bermuda, there's different companies we bring in. We're constantly looking at spread of risk. The scary thing to me is, as a community, as you guys continue to get better as a community, it's really to diversify and to spread risk, but also you have to continue to look to do mitigation. So to your question, sir, earlier, when you were talking about the fire hardening aspects of your community, that's gonna be a given. So the question is, does a zip code determine your risk? The answer is no. The answer is no. Every risk right now on homes, as you get in, especially in the larger sizes and HOAs, it is individually written and individually, the ones that if you're doing it properly are building these out as individual risks based on a whole criteria of fire hardening and what you're doing for annual mitigation. Zip code has no relevance. Now, what will happen is, because I could talk about how the Pacific Palisades prior to the fires, I got in trouble, guys. I'll tell you where I get in trouble. I was over in London. The two things I used to brag about last year was PCH doesn't burn. Because in fires, they don't ever burn, right? Well, oops, January 7th happened. The other one that I made a joke about was, with all our fires, that no HOA completely burned. Oops, there's problem number 2. So what it really comes into play now is, as we get more and more into this, is really about the fire hardening approach. And then that gives insurance companies the ability to justify numbers. So you have an older HOA, obviously redoing the roof is a necessity. I would make an argument, are you lean, clean, and green, which Cal Fire was talking about earlier? Are you doing that? Do you have an annual mitigation company that's spraying the property in August, September that will make it non-combustible? Do you have a fire service that will be at your HOA automatically without anyone notifying them to come in? These are things that will drastically reduce your costs.
What if you have a neighbor who refuses to cut something down that's within 5 feet of your dwelling?
Okay, so the first and foremost, I'm not giving legal advice. Let me go there to put that on things. I actually have a really good attorney friend of mine that I talk to constantly. His name is Don Lansing. He's Manfredi Levine.
This is what she's talking about right there, sir.
Yep. And so what happens is, you legally, when I talk to Don Lansing, he's on Thousand Oaks City Planning Commission. So what he's talking about, what happens is, you're actually allowed to maintain, in essence, if it comes across your property line, as you go straight up in the sky, where your property line is, you're technically allowed to maintain, in essence, trim away anything that's on your property, that's in the air. So my argument, the only way that this is a problem is if you have less than 5 feet separation from your neighbor. I don't know your house personally, but I always talk about the leaning tree. If you have the leaning tree that's leaning this way and going onto your property, you actually have the right to maintain that tree and push that tree back. Yep. 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 Well, I would say I can't talk about all communities, but I haven't seen anybody within 5 feet of each other. I'm just saying this. Even the ABC streets and by the way, I always joke around about Bel Air. Bel Air, it has a lot of areas where it's like, here's these $30 million houses that are 10 feet apart, and it's like, my goodness. But anyway, what I would say though, again about vegetation, usually it's about community things. I do think that the state of California is going to be fixing a lot of this because of the requirements. I live in an HOA personally myself, and single family homes, not a condo association. I did the very sneaky thing about 3 years ago to push myself on the architectural committee, and I didn't want to be on the board. I put myself on the architectural committee, and the first things I did was I eliminated eucalyptus, cypress, and palm trees. So no one could plant anything planted new was in violation, got it yanked. We're now as a board, because I've been able to demonstrate these problems, we're going to eliminate it in our community. There's 400 and something homes. We're going to start citing people for having a eucalyptus tree. They're not going to have a choice but to remove it. Yes, ma'am.
You mentioned something really quickly just now about spraying your house down for
Yes.
summer to make it uncombustible.
Yep.
Can you speak more to that, please?
Yes, there's a lot of great. The technology for homes defense has exponentially gotten better. Really, when you look at the last 5 to 10 years, there's incredible companies. A lot of the fire hardening companies that are out there, and there's several of them here today, all use different chemicals to defend homes. One of the ones I personally like, and by the way, this is not, I don't have any vested interest in this company. I get questioned this all the time. Is a company called Komodo, like Komodo Dragon. They actually have an orange peel thing that's non-combustible. It's a spray. There's a lot of great ones that are out there. I'm just using one as an example. It's biodegradable. It does not affect your plants. It's not cancerous to animals or things of that nature. But what they do is you can go out, have them spray your house in August or September when we don't. What's August, September, everybody? We get real hot. There's no rain, and we tiptoe all the way to January, holding our breaths if we can actually get some rain. Well, when you have that kind of spray and the property has been fully fire hardened and sprayed, your chances of burning exponentially decrease. So what ends up happening, like if you guys saw this, I mean, look guys, the Palisades fire was horrific. I was on scene within 2 days of the fire starting, just having firefighter contacts. And you could see homes that were treated with substances. They were like these like the sprays. They would burn up to the line of where they treated, and then everything else around it burned. So, I mean, it's just, these are things that you're going to have to start thinking about as a community, as owners. I don't care how great an insurance policy is, and I've dealt with some really great ones. I mean, if we collectively are together and we're all having barbecue or something like that, and all of our houses burn to the ground, guys, this is the shirt I own. I don't even have a pillow to put my head down on tonight. I don't have another pair of tennis shoes, which I wear on these kind of events. I don't wear dress shoes. So it's really important to realize the next generation of insurance is going to be taken into fire hardening requirements. And that's something that everyone needs to realize.
Quick question on that.
Yep.
If you do the prevention with the fire retardant,
Yep.
and your neighbors don't, your
Yep.
house is standing, I have severe respiratory problems.
Yep.
I couldn't move back into my home.
That's a really serious issue.
Yeah.
Because the problem is, and I'm going to give everyone kind of a heads up.
Okay.
Smoke damage has been rampant through these fires. I'll give an example. The Woolsey fire. We'll wait to see what happens with these Palisade fires. I'll tell you a really interesting stat. One of the insurance companies I work with, 72% of the money paid out by that for the Woolsey fire went to homes that didn't burn. Now, whether you want to say it was legitimate or fraud or things of that nature, so what's going to happen, I'm just warning everybody now, is smoke damage related claims are gone. They will be leaving California soon. So you're not going to see those kind of claims. And the reason for it is and again, I hate to say it, the bad apples spoil the bunch. Every time there's a fire, okay? So right now in Bel Air did not burn, right? Obviously it was important. Wilshire area did not burn. Lawyers are paper mache in these areas talking about, do you have damage? Your insurance company, I saw one that said your insurance company owes you free money. This is what's destroying the industry. So when something happens, I don't know a lot of you know this, but years ago, about 20 years ago, mold used to be a coverage under a homeowner's policy. Mold almost bankrupted the industry from Texas and was moving this way. The insurance companies eliminated mold because there was no way of controlling what the costs are. Smoke will be the next one because there's no way to truly control it. I'm just giving everyone a warning. My comment would be to you is, while that's going on, it might be a year or two of where you need to go to a nice island somewhere and wait to come back. I'm sorry. It's a terrible way of saying it. I get in trouble for this all the time. I think how they're clearing the Palisades right now is horrific. They should have went through and cleared it all at one time. They're doing piecemeal and it causes havoc. Because anyone with respiratory problems, that's going to continue to reflare over and over and over again.
Bob, we
Yep.
have a question here.
Where am I looking?
To your right.
Yep, there you go. Thank you.
Just a random one. Talking of that smoke damage kind of stuff, there's a lot of products here that are sort of talking about trying to safeguard your house in terms of all that kind of stuff.
Absolutely.
Fire hardening, right?
Yep.
From the friends that lost houses in Altadena and Palisades, and we've got some friends that have houses that are like the one house left on a 6-block radius kind of thing, and they can't get back into their house.
Yep.
It almost feels like sometimes it's better to just let the house go as opposed to going through all that, especially if you're talking about like smoke damage going away.
I think what happens is over time is the fire hardening continues to get better. The problem that those consumers are going to I personally wouldn't want to be the one house in the middle of 600 houses that are gone, okay? The thing that everyone needs to realize, and that's why these are great community events to talk about, is you really need to think about the more we can do fire hardening, the more we can do prevention, the more we can remove fire risk from it, saves homes. What nailed a lot of the homes in these fires is you hear that the code is regarding tempered glass for windows. The reason why tempered glass is so important between houses is if you have the original 1970 windows and the heat, they explode. Having eucalyptus trees. I was on a thing for homes. I was speaking at a art dealership this for collection of arts. They brought me in as a speaker for homes, and what was interesting was I was on with a fire mitigator, and they were talking about how He was a former fire chief, lives in Altadena, and he talked about one palm tree taking out 4 houses. So these are things as a community, we're all going to get together, because if not, insurance rates continue to rise. You're in a risk if you don't mitigate these things. You're going to find out what your costs of insurance continue to rise. Cal Fair Plan's taking rates, okay? Even if you use that as a policy of last resort, and it's going to get very expensive for you because they're going to attack for those that do not have fire hardening requirements. So what I would say to you is, you're in this fight, whether you that or you might need to move to the San Fernando Valley. Move in the middle of Reseda is my joke. There's no fire risk. Okay? Is that fair? Guys, other questions? Yes, sir. Couple questions. Am I doing a good job dancing for until the food gets here? I'm usually pretty. I like to be in front of food. I don't want to be the one after the food. You notice how fast I ran up here to push my way onto this thing. I want to make sure I was in front of food. Yes.
So
5 more minutes. Got it.
Two quick
and guys, I'll be
questions.
here, by the way, just so you know. If we don't get your question answered, I'm sitting over there by myself over there, so if it's pretty lonely over there, so you guys come over and say hi.
Yeah. First of all, thank you. This
Yep,
is all
absolutely.
wonderful info. For the fire hardening, you may have touched on this, but how long does that last for? How often do you need to do it?
Okay, so what happens is, depending on the chemical, it really depends on rains. So what happens is, generally most chemicals that you'll put down to defend your house are good for usually about anywhere up to a 2 to 3 inch rain. Obviously, what will end up happening is, depends on how you spray it. The house being different than vegetation. If people will spray their lawns, I go, well, great, that's gone. Okay, you're better off making sure you spray your house. It's why this is all a chain of events. That's the mistake people make on this, is that they're not looking at this as a chain of things that you need to do. Because I actually listened to a really interesting, one of the fire chiefs talk about this, about fire hardening. Just because you have the icing doesn't mean you have a cupcake. You got to have the base of the cupcake before you put the icing on it. So you could do an incredible job, and you could have one of these fire restoration companies spray every year for you. But if your eaves are open and you have vegetation within 5 feet and your vents aren't closed, you put icing on a bad situation. It's about it's conceptually what I'm talking to consumers and groups about is, you have to make a dramatic change of events. And it's a community situation. Every time that you have events like this and you and your neighbors can get together and talk about it, this is just a better thing. I mean, my neighbor across the street, I love him. He's got a eucalyptus tree, and I keep teasing him. Every time he's going to leave, my gardener's going to go pick it off. Okay? I just tell him, he's like, I call him Uncle Gary, by the way. He's in his 80s. I just tease him. When he goes away, he's going to come back, and the tree's going to be missing. Okay? I tease him because I want that damn tree gone. Okay? But still.
And then the follow-up to that is regarding the insurance and the impact on insurance. Are they crediting homeowners?
Well, really,
doing
is
it, or
people are
no?
making a mistake. Rates are you're going to see continue going up. I mean, you heard the one for State Farm was 17%. It was an immediate file for 40 behind it. You're going to see rates doubling. So what you're really doing is, by doing this, is trying to stop the flow of increase and be able to give yourself availability. As I mentioned, the house that we were able to take that was a State Farm non-renewal and move it back down, it was because of the fact that the person fire hardened their house. Now, if they hadn't fire hardened their house, they wouldn't have qualified for the policy. So really what the fire hardening is going to do is give you opportunity.
Okay.
It's opportunity. Yes, ma'am.
Does the state of California or LA County, can they help homeowners? Is there a plan to help us financially or through tax reductions? So if we make any of these changes, yes, it's good for our homes, but they're expensive.
Yes, they are. What happens, though, is there's really two ways. There's 2 ways of thinking about it, though, and I say this for consumers all the time. It does. I don't like to spend other people's money. Okay, I just say that. But what happens is you have to think of it as a 5-year or 10-year look. Because let's say, for example, your policy doubles over the next 5 years because you didn't do these things. And every year you're eating $3,000 to $4,000 to $5,000 more a year because you did not do these things. Everything that people do are really investments in their houses. I do believe, I am not, guys, I'll be the first one to say it, I'm not political. I stay away from it. I work with multiple departments of insurance for California, Nevada, different states. I get brought in. There's a really cool thing. I had a bill written about our concepts in Nevada. Nevada Department of Insurance is changing some of its insurance law based on us. Okay, and so that was the biggest honor I've had in a long time. I had the deputy chief call me and say he wrote a 45-page paper on WOWs and what we're directionally changing and why the industry needs to change this way, to change some of the laws and captive laws. So what I would say is, I do believe over time, I do think it is, because one of the arguments I've made to a lot of different elected officials here in California is I talk about pennies versus millions of dollars. So I'm going to say this about the Pacific Palisades, hopefully not upsetting my fire people here. I like to hike. I live where I live. I hike a ton. I have a friend that we hiked around the Getty. You can't have areas that have 30 years of not having mitigation or forestry. That basically was a fireball, 5 mile run up fireball that rolled into the Palisades. I feel horrific about any of my firefighter friends because there was not a lot they could do. And so really what we have to talk about is mitigation aspects. It's time to really talk about what we're doing as a communities. It's it, guys. One more.
Yes, hi Robert. Thank you so much at first, for all the information you shared.
Absolutely.
The clarity, especially with which you went through what we can do, the power that we actually have as a community in terms of what we can do,
Yep.
how far we can make these changes. And what I wanted to ask is, it ties in with the previous questions about what can a HOA, especially a large one, we have a few members here.
Yep.
And what we wanted to ask, I guess my question is a bit more tactical in terms of, as we action some of the changes, look
Yep.
into spraying the area,
Yep.
look into removing some of the vegetation,
Yep.
what would you recommend anybody, it could be a small HOA or large HOA, condo or houses,
Yep.
how can we better calibrate our insurance? What would be the steps? Because I know you deal with wholesale.
I hate to say this, and it's a terrible answer. Every scenario is different. Every
different.
situation is different. So just, I could talk about this gentleman's house, and he could be a situation where would make complete total sense to do something for him that would be completely wrong for you and your HOA. So it's really, it's again going back to what are you doing as a fire hardening? What are you, for HOAs and larger homes, they need annual mitigation plans. What are you doing annually? Not once. It's, a lot of times in larger homes and things like this, or just in communities, people do something, they go, all right, we're done. Well, 10 years from now, you're not done. 2 years from now, you're not done. It's what are you doing annually to maintain and directionally change your risk? Because every home, I use a terrible analogy. Really, when I work with a lot of the larger homes, or at least when I bring into programs, I use a terrible analogy. It's a beauty contest. How pretty can I make this house or this HOA so that when I go and build a portfolio to go and show the insurance companies and the reinsurance companies, the why. I get away with a lot because I have very low loss ratios. So insurance companies love me because I make money for them.
But in terms of being able to, in terms of your relationship with insurers,
Yes.
we don't have a lot of, even as a board, we have a management company, but it's very difficult to understand every time we go to renewal,
Yeah.
how much all these changes that we're making. that
So
we
I'll
plan
give you
to make.
the first tip you need to have. You should receive your renewal as an HOA 45 to 60 days prior. Okay, most HOAs don't get their renewals until a week prior.
Right.
Okay, so first question, and hopefully I'm not going to upset the property managers of the world around here. If you're not getting it within roughly 45 days, fire your broker, fire your HOA or your management company. Okay, there's first of all. Second of all, going back to it is you're really again needing to look at this as a fire hardening approach, separate of people want to talk to me about renewal dates, right? I want to do this prior to my renewal. I go, well, if your renewal is June 15th, guys, it's not going to happen. You're going to be working on next year's renewal. So what you have to think about it as everyone out there is when you're doing the fire hardening, you're doing these approaches, you're really doing this for the right reasons. How do I word this? I am very careful who I bring into our programs. I'm going to be the first one to tell you. I have insurance brokers that will bring clients to me. We require for our programs that I have to have a Zoom meeting with that consumer. Doesn't matter where it is. And I generally put them on with head of underwriting. Okay. And my argument is when I have it's again, remember I made the comment about the beauty contest? When I'm talking to a consumer, if I had one that looked up and said, this is what my insurance company is telling me I have to do. I'm not interested in doing the vents. They told me I only had a 0 to 5. I went, not interested. We no quoted. Because if you're just trying to do what the bare minimum is to try to do things, not interested. I want to have people that are, I make a comment, I'm a crusader. I'm going to fix this industry. I've got it fixed, okay? I just need people that are going the same direction as me. And if you're not going that same direction, if you're doing it because you're trying to get a cheaper rate, I hate that word cheap. That's not me. If you're telling me you're doing this because you want to better your community and you're doing this because it's the right reasons, then the money follows. All right, guys, you know what? Or you want to do one more? I'm trying to be mindful. I don't want to be in trouble. One more? Okay. I don't get me killed with the boss here, guys.
I'm sure you're fine.
Yep. Well,
so
it wouldn't be the first place I got thrown out of.
So I really appreciate your radical candor and
Yep.
the direct nature with which you communicate these risks and the mitigations available.
I'm sorry, I don't have time.
Yeah.
I always say I cut to the choice.
So here, in the hillsides, we have a very kind of unique topography.
Yep.
A lot of people depend on foliage for the privacy of their yards. And of course, like I don't have the time either. I want to get rid of all of them, but I've noticed all my neighbors are really concerned. And
They're going to be paying a lot more money.
To be reasonable, you can see into people's bedrooms from the street without more than a 6-foot fence. So my question for you is, have you encountered this problem before, and what have your solutions been?
Yep. Well, first of all, I'm going to say this terribly. You have to look at things differently when you're talking about insurance. Okay. When I'm building a program with London and I'm asking somebody to put $10 billion of capacity or potentially their money on the line for homes across California, they don't care about your privacy. They don't care. So if you don't make the criterias, I had one that has, you see the cypress tree. Those are the ones that scare me. The cypress tree fence, basically all these cypress trees in a row. There's, if you guys want to, in the Palisades, if you Google, they like to Google, there's a video. If you type in cypress tree bent sideways lighting house on fire or some kind of derivative, there's a video of a cypress tree that went up like a Roman candle. It's on fire. The wind blew it sideways. It's touching the house and it looks like a blowtorch blowing through the house. Does palm trees do it? Yep. I make a comment. Do you have a pine tree do it? No. Does an oak tree do that? No. These are things that are just different. No. The answer is 0 to 5 feet, guys. Okay, it's just, guys, everyone needs to get on board on this. Your fire department came up here and did a really great job explaining the changes. And they were being politically correct. They're talking about where this is coming down the road, they think. The answer is this is going to be passed. Okay? Insurance companies are pushing this because bottom line is they're not going to continue. Insurance companies do two things when they lose money. They stop writing policies or they take rates. That's it.
The guidance is no non-native foliage within 100 feet, for example.
Okay.
As part of the guidance, so does that mean that all these running bamboo trees,
you're right.
all that has got to go?
Has got to go. So let me ask you a question. What if it makes a $20,000 a year difference on your insurance?
Listen, I want to.
No, but I'm saying, I'm saying for that individual, I'm saying you specifically. Let's say if this was a $20,000 a year difference for you to keep that bamboo. If this was your house, most people will take that stuff out. I wanted to fight to keep their palm trees because they've had them in there, and it's a larger home. It was $80,000 a year difference. And he goes, I got the broker that called me, and they go, we want you to talk to head of underwriting to overturn this because they'll do everything else but these 2 palm trees. My response was, I smiled and said, they need to stay where they are. The palm trees are obviously worth $80,000 a year to them in cost.
So the only way I can communicate with my neighbors and compel them is just with the dollar.
Well, what it is you can. Well, what I would do is I've done a lot of different events where if you guys got collectively together on a Zoom, I do those things where I'll talk about it and I get questions. I'm sorry. The problem is the word neighbor has lots of definitions. Some of them are nice definitions and some of them are bad definitions. If they're wonderful people, then you're going to be in better shape because usually people go that way. Well, first of all, that you want to do the tempered glass. Well, no. When you do tempered glass, it's actually higher value than the double pane windows. Double pane windows is a lower level, believe it or not. So tempered glass is first of all. Second of all, as the fire department just talked about, you have to really be careful about with the window companies, is that you have to make sure it's a metal frame. Yeah, you got to have metal frame. Well, what happens is, you heard earlier, the vinyl frames melt. So metal frames don't melt. So again, you're talking about extreme heat. It's what the difference is. Aluminum, any type of metal, usually aluminum gets very expensive. So usually what they'll do is they want to try to usually do metal, like steel framed, because it's cheaper to do, and they can. Yeah, I mean, you're going to be fine that way. I mean, it's been there for 40 years, is my comment, if it's done properly. You're going to be, and as long as they seal it, okay? So what happens a lot of times with the houses is that they're not sealed. So what happened, great job. I've seen this in fires. They do an incredible job, right? The windows are all in, but they didn't properly seal. So remember everyone was talking about smoke damage earlier?
Yeah.
Okay, the more you seal your house, the less smoke damage you have. Running your filters, changing your filters on your air conditioning solves that problem too. So it's just a lot of different things. Yeah, absolutely.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
About California Fair Plan,
Yes,
because
ma'am.
we're on that policy with
Yep.
State Farm through
Okay.
State Farm.
Okay.
Can you explain that, please?
Yes. Okay. So California Fair Plan policy was a policy, believe it or not, it was designed in the early 60s for the Watts riots. It was for inner city, for businesses that couldn't get insurance or for things of that nature. The policy has obviously over time evolved into being a policy, which it does. By the way, I get in trouble for saying this. I have friends that are on the committee they get mad at me every time I say a policy of last resort, because that's not what it's supposed to be, but it is. That's what it is. And so what happens is California Fair Plan, the very first thing is that's going to cover fire. So think of it primarily as your fire insurance coverage. What State Farm is writing for you other than that is what's called a DIC by code, or slang term wraparound policy. What a wraparound policy is to do things like liability insurance and to do like water damage and theft and other coverages. One of the biggest myths about Fair Plan and DIC policies is that a lot of consumers believe that they have the Fair Plan for $3 million of total coverage, and their DIC then gives them higher coverages. It does not. It excludes fire. There is no DIC policy in California that covers fire as excess. So why it's important to know that is, a lot of times, I mean, by a show of hands, who believes the rebuild costs are going down? I mean, I laugh hysterically. I trick people by every so often I get people to raise their hands. What happens is, like the Altadena fire right now is proving it. We're seeing rebuild costs in Altadena being over $600 a square foot, okay, for rebuild. The Palisades are going to push towards $1,000. So think about that for a second. If you have a 3,000 square foot house and your rebuild's $1,000 a square foot, you're using all of your coverage for just structure. No contents, no additional living expenses, nothing else. That's why it makes a major difference. Okay, guys, good news. I'm finally getting the hook. You guys can get lunch. I'm not going anywhere. You guys can easily come over there and grab me. Everyone can beat up on me. I'm the insurance person. I'm definitely the messenger is the joke, right? All right. Thank you, everybody.